You're listening to The Other 50%, a herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. This is the podcast where I talk to successful women in entertainment and hear their stories. Our presenting sponsor is the entertainment payroll company Extreme Reach. What you may not know about Extreme Reach is that they are already an industry disruptor in the areas of creative asset management and video ad distribution. And now they're poised to disrupt the entertainment payroll business. If you're creating content, call them and tell them I sent you. Today I got to speak with Ingrid Kleinig. Ingrid is a stunt performer and a stunt coordinator. She grew up in Australia and fell into the world of stunts while performing 140 feet above the arena in the opening ceremonies of the 2000 Olympic Games. Having toured the globe with renowned physical theater company Legs on the Wall, which is basically hanging off of skyscrapers, as well as the Sydney Theatre Company, she had formed a wealth of physical, technical, and artistic vocabulary across multiple fields, including directing and rigging, that lent itself perfectly to the stunt industry. Ingrid hails from a long line of professional drivers, so vehicles became an early niche. She was one of only 2 female stunt drivers on Mad Max Fury Road, can drive a big rig truck, and hold her breath underwater for 5.5 minutes. She is also the first female to be officially graded as an Assistant Stunt Coordinator in Australia, where, to date, no female has ever held the position of Stunt Coordinator. And she is one of a handful of female stunt coordinators here in the U.S. Her story is remarkable, and we talk about her journey, how it was to rise in this field as a woman, and how she is navigating motherhood as a stunt performer, proving once again that it is foolish to underestimate a working mother. Her credits include Captain Marvel, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Justice League, Suicide Squad, basically everything. She is formidable and she laughs at fear. Literally, wait for it. You can find us at theother50%.com for added features, photos, show notes, and the merchandise. You can also listen on Apple Podcasts and all the podcast places. Also, the Insider's Guide to Breaking Into and Navigating Hollywood, called Catch a Break, has launched, and it is available on Apple Podcasts, all the podcast places, and on the website, catchabreakpodcast.com. Go check that one out, too. Okay, here's my conversation with Ingrid Kleinig. Have a listen. You are the first person with this job that I've had on this show.
Great.
So tell me, what do you do?
I am a stunt performer and stunt coordinator. I have been in the film industry for a little over 30 years, which is showing my age, but the last 20 of that was in the capacity in the stunt department.
That's amazing. I want to hear all about it. What's the superhero movie you just did?
The main one was Ant-Man and the Wasp. I did a little bit on Captain Marvel, but that was just little bit. So I was full-time on Ant-Man and the Wasp down in Atlanta for some months working for Evangeline Lilly.
Amazing. Yes. Okay, how did you start? What is your background?
That I get asked a lot, and it's actually a tricky one because there's no sort of clear path that I followed or, one skill. I wasn't an Olympic gymnast or a high diver or something like that, which right. A lot of people in the industry do come from one solid background. They're horse people or whatever, they're specialists. I kind of have a lot of skills that feed in. It's more like a field, if you would. So I did a lot of adventure sports growing up. I trained at university as a dancer, and then I was working in a physical theatre company that did shows on the side of skyscrapers. So we toured the world.
Okay, slow down.
Slow down.
I want to unpack that a little bit. First of all, you grew up in Australia.
Yes, I grew up in Australia. And I didn't have much access to, I had no access to the stunt industry. I actually thought that actors did all of their own stunts.
Of course.
Of course. Magical. Yes. Superhero beings that can act and jump off tall buildings. But my first exposure to the stunt world, I was performing for the opening ceremony of the Olympics in Sydney in 2000.
And what were you doing?
I was flying about 140 foot above the arena. I was working as an aerialist in a physical theatre company, and there were people hanging in harnesses and flying through the air and pyros going off, and it was quite a spectacular event.
Oh my God.
Yes. So I met a stunt coordinator there, and he said, you should, think about doing this as a profession. And I had said, wait. Well, I can do everything that I love to do and have loved doing my entire life and travel the world and be paid for it.
And that's a
Sold.
job?
I'm in. That's a job. I can actually make a career out of this. You're kidding me.
That is crazy. Okay, talk about the performing on the side of skyscrapers.
Okay, so that was for an Australian physical theatre company called Legs on the Wall. And basically we would dangle from ropes on skyscrapers around the world, and we would interact with projections and live musicians and that kind of thing, and we sort of did the festival circuit. I worked for them for about 10 years. I started out as a performer and moved up to directing. So I was co-creating shows with the Sydney Theatre Company with Kate Blanchett and Joseph Fiennes, and working with all these amazing people, performing in Geneva. And then within that, so my time with the company, I also did a lot of work and training as a rigger, which taught me a lot of what I needed to survive in the stunt industry.
Yeah,
because a lot of
literally survive.
Literally survive. A lot of the work we do is in harnesses, especially on these superhero movies. Being flung around the room, and in that situation, often you are at the mercy of the people who are on the other end of your line. You know, because you can't control that situation. So
you have to trust them.
You have to trust them, absolutely. And I had a couple of close calls where simple things were not done correctly, and I didn't know much at the time. All I knew was to check that my carabiner, which is the metal link at the top of your rope, is done up. Mm-hmm. And I'd be about to step over the edge of this building, the tallest building in the Southern Hemisphere, and I'd check and realise that it wasn't done up, and go, if I'm catching these things, what is it I'm missing? What else am I not catching that I don't know about? And I guess that taught me a very, very important skill early on, that people are fallible. Yeah. And we're human and we make mistakes, and we need to instill processes that try and eliminate that risk, that human error.
Now, did you have a lot of fear jumping off the building knowing that you were harnessed in?
No, I never had fear jumping off a building. I love it. To this day, I love it. I love heights. I love getting that perspective that no one else in the world gets to have. I mean, you can't, as general public, you don't get to go to these amazing places and these rooftops and jump off the edge. And so I had this experience around the world that is unique. And it's still my passion to this day. I love heights. I love working with wires and rigs and ropes. But there was never any fear, not with that aspect of it.
I don't even know what to say. That's unbelievable to me.
I know a lot of people in the industry, they have their own quirks, and I'm sure there are things that for example, I will never take a motorbike job. It's not my skill. Okay. Yep. And I know, I can ride a motorbike, I have a motorbike license, but there's a certain level of understanding there that you need to have. You need to have grown up riding dirt bikes since you were 4 years old.
You're not jumping that off a ramp over fiery things.
Well, no, yes, I have actually. I have ridden a motorbike, standing on the seat, and crashed head-on into a van that was on fire and catapulted through the flames and landed on the other side of the van. I did actually do that, and that was one of my early jobs in the stunt industry. And perhaps that's why I don't do motorcycle stunts anymore. I think I learned my lesson.
Was there an issue with that? Did you get hurt?
There wasn't an issue, no. I didn't get hurt, and it went perfectly, but it was a situation where we only had one motorbike, we only had one van, there was no second takes, there was no room for error, we couldn't go again if something went awry, and the stakes were high. And I was very new, not to the film industry, but to the stunt industry, and I had done the training, we'd broken down the stunts, and we'd done the preparation, and we'd done each part of the stunt individually, so I knew that I had the physical skill I needed to do the job. But I was way too green for that at that time, And
were you lucky it all went well?
Yeah, I guess so. Lucky, and we'd put in the preparation, but at that time in Australia, there was no one else that could have done it either. So if it was here, you'd go out and get the motorcycle expert or the driving expert or something like that. There are people with 40 years experience in the film industry, and that's the kind of person you want for a stunt like that. I was like, this is not what I need. And the street was locked down for traffic, but not for pedestrians. So this crowd had gathered, because filming in Australia, you don't get to see it. It's not such it's not such a common occurrence as it is here. So there was probably a crowd of 150 or 200 spectators, just adding to the pressure. Fun times.
That is crazy.
Yeah, trial by fire. And, literally, since then, it's a good lesson to me that don't say yes to, it's such a great lesson. It's not worth it. Don't say yes. You don't need the work. Just if you're not 100%, 110% comfortable with a job, let it go to someone else.
Yeah, I think in that we don't want you saying yes if you're not 100%.
But a lot of performers feel the pressure, especially starting out, to do so because it is hard to get a foothold in the industry and it's hard to get the work. And the drive is there and the passion. And in any other sort of realm within the film industry, that wouldn't be an issue because you're not putting...
actors do it all the time.
Exactly.
I can ride a horse. I can golf.
Yeah. But you're not putting yourself or other people at risk as an actor saying, yeah, I can do that. I can do the job, or I can cry on cue, or I can
I'll
golf,
figure it out over the weekend.
Totally.
So can you tell me how a stunt is kind of created? Because I assume there's a lot of repetitive things that happen, but every now and then there's probably something brand new. So then how do you figure out to take the skills and what you know how to do to create this brand new thing?
I feel like every stunt has been done. And even if it seems like something brand new, every element of it has been done. So you're just recreating these elements, pulling these elements from your past work or other people's past work and recreating them into a brand new amalgam of a stunt. But there's very little redesigning the wheel. Actually, I should take that back. There is a lot of amazing technological advances in the stunt industry at the moment that are essentially reinventing the way that the industry works. So once upon a time, high falls were a big thing. Nowadays we use a decelerator, so we jump off a building but we're attached to a line. And obviously visual effects and CG are playing a big part in even just recreating the background, or taking out a pad so you can have a mat on the ground to fall on, or taking out the box rig, and just simple things like that. Line removal, so a performer can be on a harness but you take it out in post. Face replacement, that kind of thing, is totally revolutionising our industry and making it safer for us and making it easier to do what we do repetitively, if that makes sense. So,
do you think that can prolong a career?
Yes, absolutely.
Because it's a little bit easier on your body?
Yes, absolutely. And if you're smart about how you perform, you can absolutely have a long career in this industry, as opposed to when I was coming up through the ranks. All the guys, and I say guys because they were all guys that I worked with, older guys who were the stunt coordinators, were broken, had one leg, one eye, no depth perception. And I was like, is this my future? Is this how I'm going to end up? What am I doing to myself? So I was determined, and I touched wood to try and play it smart. I digressed from the question that you actually asked, which was how does a stunt come together?
I forgot. We were going down another path.
I went down on a tangent. It's as I said, I feel like everything has been done before. It's very important to me to learn from what has gone before, be it 20 years before or 2 weeks ago. Take everyone's experiences and information on board, dissect that, the successes as well as the failures, and learn from that and apply that to the work that I do. And
do you learn that by what you've done yourself and talking to people? Is there some big stunt repository where you can learn how people did something 10 years ago?
There isn't, but that's a great idea. No, a lot of it is personal experience. So just being in the industry, being on set, working, you come across the same things over and over again, or even the same stunt, but if you're working with a different team, it's approached a completely different way. So if I'm breaking down a script, I go, I have personally done that stunt, that stunt, that stunt, that stunt. Now, how do I, as a coordinator, how do I decide to approach it? Because there's 5 different ways I could do this one stunt. So then, it comes down to location and budget and time and personnel and that kind of a thing to go, which is the most appropriate way to approach this one stunt. Other than that, stunt people love to talk. I say stunt guys because usually it's the guys telling the stories. We'll get into that. Love to talk. So a lot of knowledge comes, handed down through the ranks based on the stories of that time when I was jumping off a building on fire, doing 6 backflips. Let me tell you about the time back in my day when ... And you learn from that and you go, great story. I wouldn't do it that way. And move on.
Okay, so let's talk about the guys.
Fun.
Are there lots of women in this job?
There are increasingly a lot of women in the stunt industry as performers. When I started out, in Australia there were a handful of us, and now there's a lot of great women coming up through the ranks. And in the States, there's a recent explosion of amazingly skilled, talented performers. On the flip side of it, there are very few women who are stunt coordinators. I can count on one hand the women worldwide who are doing it in the big leagues, you know.
How did you get into that position?
I guess longevity within the industry, having a solid formative background. So in Australia, to get into the stunt industry, you actually have to be graded by a national panel.
Oh.
Yeah, so you actually have to be ratified in a certain sort of skill sets, but you have to attain certain licenses and certain levels and certain skills, and you start out right at the bottom of the ranks as a trainee. You can't perform any mainline stunts, and then after a few years and a few hundred days in front of camera, you can move up a level, and then same thing again, more skills, move up a level, move up a level. So there's actually formal training involved in, you know, occupational health and safety and risk management and rigging.
Serious profession.
Serious profession. So I had that amazing basis, not only as a performer, but on the flip side of things. And I have a business degree, so budgets are not a problem, which is actually a really big thing.
Yeah.
You know, as a head of department, which a lot of stunt people as performers, amazing performers, just have no way with numbers.
Yeah.
Or, you know, perhaps not a great rapport with the production team or that kind of a thing. So
It's hard to have
actually
expertise in everything.
Absolutely, yeah. And being the world's best performer doesn't necessarily translate to the world's best stunt coordinator.
Sure.
And so I think coming here with that background really stood me in good stead. So in the US, there's no, which is astounding to me, there's no formal qualifications.
Is it all
to
apprentice?
be a stunt person. It's not even apprentice, and I wish it was. And actually, at the moment, SAG is trying to introduce an apprenticeship program, which is amazing. And I'm really hoping that it goes through and takes off. But no, here you can just rock up to set and say, I'm a stunt person.
No.
Yes. How is
No.
that? No, and you can rock up to set and say, I'm a stunt coordinator.
No.
Having never performed a day in your life on stunts. I mean,
So
obviously...
is it up to the company to thoroughly vet you and make sure that...
Yeah, and obviously the producers are unlikely to hire a stunt coordinator who's
course.
never done a job on set, but it happens. Friends of friends or what have you. So it is entirely up to the producer or production to vet.
So for the union qualification, is it just days and not actual qualification?
As in for the Screen Actors Guild, for the SAG qualification? I mean, all you need to do is be
Hired.
a SAG member. So you could have been an extra for, I think, 3 days or
Yeah.
something to get your SAG card, and then you can become a stunt person. Yeah, or a stunt coordinator.
So you just got to trust that the people in it are training people, vetting people.
Yeah, I mean, there is, so it's a scary situation both as a performer and as a coordinator, because as a performer, you get a call from a coordinator that you've never heard of, which happens all the time, and you have to try and vet them and make sure you're not walking into a situation that you're not prepared for or that's unsafe.
You don't know if they've set the carabiner.
Exactly. You don't know if they've ever done a job before. So that's about calling around to people that you've worked with, trying to do some research, dig down on them. Hey, do you know this person? Are they safe? Are they reliable? Are they professional? You know, that kind of a thing.
Oh, I'm scared now.
I know. So that's as a performer. And then on the flip side, as a stunt coordinator, you're hiring performers who, you know, are endorsed by SAG to a degree, but you don't know their experience and you have to trust what they say. If you say, hey, can you jump from this rooftop to that rooftop? And it's what I was saying earlier about people being so keen and hungry and desperate for the job that often there's a pressure to say yes. Mm-hmm. And it's really difficult as a coordinator to trust what people are saying. So I think within the industry, and there is a reputation for the stunt industry being very close shop, and the reason for that is that you need to know the team that you're working with.
Yeah.
And when you have a good team around you, you stick with them because you know their skills, their downfalls, what they can and can't do, whether you can trust what they say. And it's such a big, big part of it. So as you were talking about apprenticeships, and SAG is trying to instigate that. Traditionally, the career path for stunt coordinators was sons, mates, brothers, uncles, you know, just being brought up through the ranks. And
You see it in the credits, everyone has the same last name.
They do.
in the
I know,
department.
it's
like
amazing.
gaffers.
And, yeah, and the plus side of that is that you grow up with this amazing knowledge. You know, it's almost a genetic knowledge of it's just instilled in you.
You grow up in it.
You grow up in it, so it's second nature. So there is absolutely a lot of great benefits to that kind of a system. It's just rare that the women are brought up that way.
Right.
So a lot of the women that are in the industry and doing well have not come to it through, a family background or through an upbringing. It's just they've found their way here, navigated their way here by whatever means, and then have gone, right, what do I need to do to get there? And some people have had, I know some women have had amazing male mentors. I've had amazing male mentors in my time, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, I wanted to dig in a little bit about how was it for you as a woman coming over and getting in? Like, was it harder? Did you have obstacles? Did you have to be better than everybody else? How did this happen?
As a woman, you always have to be better than everyone else.
You know
I know
that.
people will rally against me saying that, but you absolutely have to be better than everyone else. And the reason for that is that every single day you turn up to set, people expect you to be worse than everyone else. They underestimate your ability. So
You have to prove it every day.
every single day you have to prove it. And I know that is across the board for women in any profession. The difference being in the stunt industry, it's very obvious right away if you are or are not better than everybody else on set, or are not capable of doing a job. And I remember I was doing a car commercial. This was back in Australia, and there was a handful of drivers on it. I was the only woman. A couple of the drivers were the Subaru World Rally Championship drivers, like amazing drivers. And we had this really particularly difficult shot where there was an exterior camera rig mounted to the car. And it sat about 1.5 inches off the ground, and we were driving, on rocky terrain and that kind of a thing. So it was a difficult job. And the director said to the stunt coordinator, "All right, who do you want to drive for this shot?" He looked around at the drivers and he went, "Ingrid." And one of the grips, who admittedly just spent a couple of hours setting up this very complex camera rig, just went, "What, her?" in front of the entire crew. And I just took a breath.
You're going to ruin my camera rig.
Exactly. And the stunt coordinator just smiled to himself. And one of the, I'll never forget this, one of the Subaru World Rally Championship drivers was like, "What do you mean not her?"
Oh, good for him.
Good for him. I guess also because he's not exposed to the film industry and is not as used to that kind of behaviour as we are.
It didn't seem normal to him?
It didn't seem normal to him, whereas to me, water off a duck's back. I'm like, I deal with this every single day. I'm turning up to set as a female driver, and trying to dispel the standing stereotypes about female drivers, again, every day of my life. So anyway.
Only every day of my life.
Every day of my life. And the difference in that situation is, if the shot was, rallying these cars, through the field and up an embankment, absolutely those rally champions would have been the best person for the job. Mm-hmm. But not one of them had ever driven with an exterior mounted camera rig. And at that time, my bread and butter was doing car commercials, probably 3 days a week.
So this is your jam.
So this is my jam. So there was no one on that team that was more experienced driving with an exterior mounted camera rig. So that's why I was chosen for the job. Best person for the job. Just happened to be female. Yeah. Funny thing is, probably 5 years later, I was working on The Great Gatsby, and that same grip came up to me and apologised for what he said. He did. So obviously that sat with him for all that time. And I don't know who he is. I can't remember.
You made an impression.
Who he is.
Changing
and he
hearts
sat
and
about
minds,
it. He thought,
at a time.
Obviously thought about it. Exactly.
Wow, that is wonderful. Do you find, I don't know if this happens for you now, but has there ever been a period where you got hired more for what people would perceive as female stunts or female movies? You know what I'm asking.
Oh, I know what you're asking. So when I started out, there were only female stunts. Mm-hmm. So I spent a great majority of my career being, a hooker getting rustled up by the gents, or, a dead body of a prostitute floating in the harbour. Or,
mostly a crime victim.
Yeah, a lot of that. A victim. Absolutely. There were very, very few. There were no heroic roles as a female. Mm-hmm. And there were very few strong roles. I remember a show came out at one stage it was called Rescue 101, and there was a couple of female rescue paramedics. And that was a big thing. So it was constant work, some really interesting stunts. And while they weren't heroic, they were at least empowered and strong and capable. And every couple of episodes there would be a twist where the woman had to rescue the person because she was small enough to fit through the hole, you know, or the air conditioning duct, and the guys couldn't do it. So all of a sudden the woman came to the rescue. And that was a massive thing. And I sat back and I was like, am I going to spend the rest of my career doing the same stunts, falling over in heels, or do I want to be challenged to do something bigger and better? And that was actually one of the main things that prompted the move to the US. At that time, women were just starting to be given more interesting things to do. Black Widow had just come out in the Marvel universe, and she was kicking ass, and she was one of the first. And I did the Hobbit trilogy in New Zealand with Peter Jackson. I was doubling Evangeline Lilly. She was playing an elf who was the head of the Elven Guard and this amazing fierce warrior. And I got a taste for it. I got a taste for being the hero. And I just went, I don't want to go back. This is what I want to do.
This is better.
This is so much better. And then on the flip side, as a coordinator, there are absolutely female-driven jobs that you get because you're a female. And so when I say there's probably a handful of women coordinating at that high level worldwide, there are so many other women coordinating and feature films, big feature films, but it's for, 50 Shades of Grey because you have a woman in bondage or that kind of thing. It's not coordinating Marvel movies or big action movies or a James Bond or that kind of a thing. It's not Fast. It's definitely not Fast and Furious. Yeah. So there really is a very gender-driven sort of bias towards the jobs that are currently going to the few women that are doing it.
What do you think it'll take to get to the part where we just need a stunt? It's gender non-specific. It can be anybody.
So there are actually a couple of coordinators working towards that at this moment in time. So we call ND roles, nondescript roles. So you need 12 soldiers. And there are a couple of stunt coordinators hiring 50-50, male to female, for nondescript roles. The problem with that is that there are times when, you've got 12 mercenaries or 12 soldiers or whatever, production doesn't want their heroes to be seen beating up women. So a lot of the time, the problem we face is that the generic roles or the roles where you need a lot of people, a lot of bodies, it's not suited for women, or the war movies, because traditionally there were just never women there.
Right. That's interesting you said they don't want the heroes beating up women. The villains can beat up women all day long. Oh, yeah. We don't mind watching that.
Oh, no, but Captain America can't beat up a woman. You've never seen Captain America beat up a woman, and even in those films you've got... fortunately now there are a lot of more women in the cast, but you see the guys fight the guys and the women fight the women. The women do actually beat up the guys. That's allowed. But so that cuts down the ability to sort of hire gender neutral a lot for those kind of constraints.
So interesting. Do you think you've been paid the same as your male counterparts?
Yes and no. So SAG controls the rate that we are paid. So everybody starts out at the same base rate. That being said, as a lead double, if you are with an actor and you're with them for a certain number of years and a certain number of projects, and you are their double in their contract sometimes or not, but they request you to be on a show, then you start negotiating your rate. We call it your rate, and it's basically SAG scale 1.5 or SAG scale times 2 or whatever. And that is pretty much across the board the way it works for the guys that are doubling the superheroes. Women are not really able to negotiate their rate. It's not
Even if you're attached to a talent?
Even if you're attached to a talent, yeah. I mean, it has happened, but it's exceedingly rare. And
they're having trouble negotiating their rate.
Yeah. And I know a female stunt coordinator that has a rate, but she's the only one I know of. Whereas it would be unheard of for a male to be working on base rate. This just doesn't happen. So that is one thing that needs to change. I don't know what the solution for that is. I mean, I've attempted to, have that discussion and work on my rate when I've been working for an actor that I've worked for, for maybe 10 years. And they're double and they've requested me on a run of a show.
Seems essential.
Doesn't go
Really?
down. Yeah.
Do you have representation?
No, so stunt performers, there are no agents in this country for stunt performers. We have commercial agents, to send you out to commercial castings, that kind of a thing. There are stunt coordinators that are represented by some of the agencies, and they will negotiate that, but performance don't. No, so it's up to you to either go to the producer or the coordinator and say, this is what I want.
It's hard. It's hard. And you've got to do it.
I know.
Now, have you also done some acting where you weren't doing stunts?
No. I mean, let me think about that. Yes and no. I've actively avoided straight acting work. And the reason for that is because there are so many amazing actors out there, and all they do is commit to that. I'm an actor. I work at my craft.
All in.
I hone. This is what I do. And for me, it's a little bit like actors who want to do all their own stunts or say they can do their own stunts. Like, there's always a concession that has to be made to one or the other. Either the acting suffers because, you've injured yourself, or you're busy trying to rehearse your fight scenes or whatever, and you're not wholeheartedly committed to this, to the acting side of things. I think the same applies to the stunt side of things. If you're spending time, pursuing the acting, and I want to be an actor and I want to do this, then that detracts from the physical side of things. And my point of difference is my physicality. That being said, I love roles that are, in inverted commas, acting roles, but require action, where there's action involved. And that's where my forte is and where it comes into play.
Now, can we talk about how do you, because your job is your body, how do you keep in shape? Like, what is your workout? I feel so weird asking you this question, but it is your job, so.
It is, yeah. It's it changes, I think, depending where you are in your career. So in the early days, all my spare time was spent learning new skills. So whether it was motocross riding for Mad Max Fury Road, or freediving for Suicide Squad, or archery for the Hobbit trilogy, you're trying to amass skills. So in between jobs, you're out there training. Then there comes a point where you've sort of reached a base level of skill and physicality across whatever range of,
like how
fields.
to do all the things.
Yeah, or all the things that you are interested in doing, or feel like you could market yourself as. Motorcycles now. So then you're at a point where I think the training is more job specific, or it's more maintenance related. If I have a job coming up and I know there's a specific skill, I will go out and I'll, cram for that job. And then as soon as the job's over, I'll let it go, because who knows what the next thing I'm going to need is. Mm-hmm. So in between, it's maintenance for me, especially where I am in my career. Physical maintenance is very important, and that's low impact. I remember when I started out, I thought that yoga and Pilates and swimming were for, wimps. I was like, that's not exercise. Why are we not mountain climbing and rock climbing? And
isn't it funny how when you get older, suddenly yoga's really hard?
Suddenly yoga's really hard and necessary.
And it's real.
Yeah, and so actually these days it's more about ironing out the kinks, making sure everything is just continuing to run smoothly in between times, because then inevitably when I step on set, it's being slammed against walls and, falling downstairs, and that's, I don't need to train that.
No, you need to be kind to your body.
Exactly.
So what is your favorite workout of choice right now? Is it yoga, Pilates?
Pilates Reformer.
Me too. I'm on at 2:00.
Really?
I love it.
It's the best. There is nothing that compares. Really?
It's amazing.
It's so great, isn't it? Yeah, for everything.
I'm doing a stunt performer's workout. Let the record show.
And surprisingly difficult. I mean, you look at it.
Yeah.
If you were to watch it,
you're just laying down.
You're just lying down.
I start with my eyes closed, like sleeping.
I was on Suicide Squad, and Will Smith had set up a gym in one of the stages at Pinewood Studios in Toronto. This amazing gym where everybody could come and train and work out, and there were full-time personal trainers there, and you'd get the office accountants coming in their lunch break, and it was this melting pot of everybody, and it was such a wonderful, wonderful space. And Margot Robbie, who I was doubling at the time, asked for a Pilates reformer machine to be in there as part of all the CrossFit. Yeah. Everything else was big CrossFit, and we've got the tire, and the sledgehammers. We're hitting a tire with a sledgehammer. She was
I
like,
never
that's
wanna do
great,
that.
but that's not really going to, I know my body and I know what kind of physicality I need for this job and I know the training that's going to get me there. This was Margot, and she requested a Pilates reformer machine and a trainer for, you know, the first part of pre-production to just kind of accelerate the process. And she got it, but anytime I was in the gym working on the reformer, all the guys would be in there just like, what is that? That's not doing anything, you know. The personal trainers, what are you doing? Come and hit some tires with a sledgehammer with us. That's not doing anything. I'm like, you have no idea.
No idea.
I am dying inside. And actually the Pilates trainer, Margot's Pilates trainer, took one of the personal trainers for a session one day and he nearly died. And we were like, ha, 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 ha. You see. No idea.
Did he become a convert?
No, not even remotely.
But maybe a little respect?
Yeah, no, maybe. Hopefully. We'll see.
Funny.
Yeah.
Now, you told me that you were married and you have a child. Is your husband also in the business?
He is. He's a DP, a director of photography.
Handy.
Handy, very handy.
How often do you get to work together?
Never.
Do you take turns?
These days we try and prioritize one or the other. You know, if I've got a great project coming up, then it's my turn, in inverted commas. And the same goes for him. But we also, you know, we're working out how to make it work if both of us are working at the same time.
Because your baby's still pretty small.
She's 2, yeah. So that's a new learning curve for us, and
It's a whole new negotiation.
it's a whole new negotiation, and it has actually affected the types of jobs that we're doing. He does a lot of feature documentaries that travel him around the world, to Guinea on the west coast of Africa and to Japan and that kind of a thing. So that kind of project has been reined in quite a lot. And then I do features that are never shot in LA. It's always, you know, Toronto or Atlanta or Bulgaria.
And are you there for months? Or
7 months, generally, yeah. We usually spend a few months in pre-production for a big job. If you're on the full-time team, and then, you know, 4 months shooting or whatever. So it's a whole year. And so that's affected the kinds of roles that I can accept. You know, last year I'm like, I can't spend 8 months of the year in Bulgaria. That's kind of not going to work for us. So, so we're trying to be more Los Angeles based. And it is a big thing, you know, as a female and as a stunt performer, having a young one, there's a bit of a stigma attached to that traditionally.
Yeah, have people, are people calling you less since that happened?
If they are, they're not people I want to work for anyway, so.
Did you work while you were pregnant?
No. So I found out, I was doing the reshoots of Suicide Squad when I found out. And we had about 5 days left of shooting. And because it was reshoots, we had already rehearsed everything and I knew what was coming up. And there was no ability for surprises to be dropped in, because basically the edit's locked and all we're doing is filling in this 3 frames here.
Oh, so it's very specific.
Yeah, 30 seconds here, this, la, la, la. So I finished the last 5 days of shooting of that. And it was very early when I found out. And I didn't accept another job from there on in. But I also didn't let it be known to the industry that I was pregnant for the whole of the pregnancy.
Were you just unavailable?
I was unavailable.
We had to assume you're on some other job.
Yes, which is easy to do when you're working all around the world. It actually wasn't a problem. So whenever someone called me, I just sort of said, sorry, I'm unavailable. Thanks for thinking of me. Because I have, you know, in my years coming up through the ranks, I've seen all the women that came before me pretty much across the board involuntarily retired once they had a child.
Dang.
Yeah.
And that can be young.
Yeah. And
it's not 65.
No, it's definitely not going to be 65, retirement age. And I absolutely understand that for some women, the mindset changes. And they don't want to jump off buildings and set themselves on fire anymore. They're a carer. I 100% wholeheartedly...
This is the beauty of choice.
Absolutely understand that. But that needs to be their choice. And so many times it's not. And I was...
Has that changed for you?
Yes and no. I was never particularly one to put myself in a risky situation to start with, or a situation where I was uncomfortable. After the first time where I crashed a motorbike into a van on fire, from then on,
You're not trying to die on set.
I was very determined to, you know, be in control and know what was going on. What actually has changed for me, which is a boon, especially in the stunt coordinating side of things, is the hypervigilance that comes with being a parent. I call it my helicopter parenting. You see through space and time, your vision broadens, and you actually see all the potential consequences, the things, the threats, the consequences. Exactly. 5 steps down the line, you're looking ahead, and that's something that you don't necessarily need to do when you're just thinking about yourself. So that has absolutely been a skill that I've gained.
So it's made you better.
And of course it's made better. Absolutely made me better.
Now, do you feel at all a little nervous, even right now, talking about it and talking about your baby?
Not nervous, because generally speaking, people know now. I got a call, it was for Ant-Man and the Wasp, and Evangeline contacted the stunt coordinator and said, I want Ingrid on as my stunt double. And I just had my daughter. I was like, right, when do we start shooting?
Like, how fast do I have to do that?
How long until we start wardrobe fittings? I didn't tell him that I'd just had a baby, because I actually wanted to tell him in person so he could see me, see that I was, back in shape, which unfortunately is actually a prerequisite. Yeah. Physically capable. I didn't end up catching up with him before I ended up down in Atlanta. So he didn't know, none of the team knew. I started wardrobe fittings when she was 3 months old, and I was out in the car park expressing so that I would possibly maybe fit into some kind of statistics of Evangeline Lilly. And I was like, what am I doing? This is ridiculous. So we started rehearsals full-time down in Atlanta when she was 5 months old. And it was about 6 weeks into the project, the assistant stunt coordinator was having a birthday party for one of his children. And I rocked up with my daughter in the chest pack. And he was like, oh, who's this? I was like, oh, she's mine. Oh, no, actually, I said, what did I say? I said, oh, she's a friend's. I thought it would be a applicable, a useful prop for a kid's birthday party to bring a kid, to bring a child. And he went, oh, okay, cool. I'm like, no, she's fine. So that was an interesting kind of outing to everybody.
Did you take a nanny with you to set, or was it your husband? How did you manage?
So this is the first instance of when my husband and I discovered that working in different countries doesn't exactly work for us anymore. Yeah. So the day that my daughter and I flew down to Atlanta to start working full-time on this job, he flew to Australia to start a 2.5-month project.
Oh my God.
So we actually flew my mother-in-law, to Atlanta to live with us. It was the only way to do it for 2.5 months.
And you were breastfeeding?
Oh yeah. Breastfeeding, pumping. I didn't have lunch with the crew once in 7 months, because I was always locked in a toilet stall, pumping and shoveling food in my mouth simultaneously. I'm like, you've got half an hour, go, pump.
It's so hard.
It's so hard. It's so absurd. But it's what you have to do. Obviously, if you're committed to breastfeeding, and that's your thing, and it was my thing. And at the same time, I didn't want to make an issue out of it. So I didn't want to,
of course,
come onto set. I wanted to prove that it could be done and not impact production in any way.
Of course.
So I don't want a special room for breastfeeding. I don't want extra breaks or time off or anything. I'm going to make it work within the constraints that we're given.
This is not happening.
This is not happening.
It will not affect you.
When, there are days that you work straight through lunch and you do a 12-hour day, and because you're in costume, which involves a corset that you can't actually get out of by yourself, there is no way to access the breasts for the pumping. So there were a few days that were a little bit hairy there, but
oh man,
we got through it. Yeah.
If anyone underestimates a working mother, I mean, honestly,
they've got
no idea.
No idea. And, that being said, I still come across, I was on a job after having my daughter, and they were talking about people to bring down for a simple driving job, and the stunt coordinator went, oh no, she's just had a baby. She won't want to take 2 weeks away from the kid to come and do a job. I went, hang on a minute. One, that child is now 5 years old and in school. She hasn't just had a baby. In your mind, perhaps, that was recent. It's actually not. She has a husband. Mm-hmm. Maybe she would like the job, and maybe she would like the choice of saying yes or no.
Maybe
this
we let
works
her
for
decide.
me or not. Maybe you give her a call. Seeing as, she's good, she's a great performer and she's skilled, and she dropped into the conversation because of her suitability for the job.
And the baby's 5?
And the baby's 5.
She might love 2 weeks
She would really love a getaway, believe me. 2 weeks away, that sounds great.
I think that's the piece we need to change, is the assumption that she's not interested or won't want to do it. And the kid is 5.
And the kid is 5, and every male on the team has now young children.
Would you ever say that about a man?
No, but they have wives at home looking after the child, as it should be, I say, with sarcasm.
She put air quotes up and she said the as it should be.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, so we still have some work to do.
We do, yeah.
But we knew that.
Yeah, but at the same time, there is a receptiveness to the change. So when I bring that up, it's not even, how do I describe this? That stunt coordinator wasn't necessarily coming from a place of maliciousness. It was just an ingrained kind of an assumption.
So when you challenged that assumption,
yes,
what was the response?
The response was, yes, absolutely. I shouldn't have said that. Let's give her a choice. So there just needs to be, that's all it takes, but there needs to be someone in the room that's prepared to, thinking about it that way, which usually means that it needs to be a woman, and B, it's prepared to challenge that, which often is hard, and women in the room are not always comfortable enough to be that person.
And I think it's time for us to ask men to also have that thought and speak up in the room.
Yeah. And I've worked with some great guys, especially some of the newer generation that are thinking that way.
That's good.
I
think that is a challenge before us.
Yeah.
How has the Me Too of it all changed, or has it changed the dynamic in the stunt department?
Yes and no. I have it's a rule for myself that if ever I work for someone and I'm put in a situation that I'm not comfortable with, I will never, ever, 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 ever work for them again, regardless of how great the job is. I won't answer their calls or emails. That's it.
They are dead to you.
You are dead to me. So because of that, I generally work on teams. I'm fortunate enough to work on teams that are great. The guys are like my brothers and they've got my back, and I give them shit, they give me shit, but at the end of the day, they're going to take care of you. There's a love and respect there, absolutely. So fortunately, I don't have to deal with too much of that. But I know that there's a lot of shit still going down, and so many women that I know who are such great performers have fallen by the wayside and quit the industry because they just don't want to have to deal with that bullshit. And it's particularly rife because often on a job there's 40 guys on the stunt team and 1 woman. Very rarely is there a couple of women that you can be like, hey, let's band together and protect ourselves. It just rarely happens. So you're out there, you're on your own, you're often on location, and you're dealing with this shit, and so many people that could be wonderful allies in the industry have fallen by the wayside because of that behaviour. That being said, on the flip side of things, I think that people's reputation perhaps is being taken into consideration.
Are people being more careful now and thinking about hiring within the context of who they know is not going to be a liability in that regard?
Yes, absolutely. It's a thought and maybe not a discussion, but it's something that is considered.
So there's like overt conversation of this will be a safe space for women on the set.
Yeah.
I love that.
Not always, obviously, but but it has happened, in recent
And before it probably wouldn't have ever happened.
Not a chance.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. And, there have been recently, I know a couple of agents who have let go of stunt coordinators they've represented because of, issues in the media and inappropriate behaviour. And that would never have happened. No, you don't get to be a monster anymore. Once upon a time that was celebrated. It was the norm. It was just the way to be. It is hopefully no longer.
Amen. Now, even if you're not working together on set, have the female stunt people banded together in general?
Yes and no. Historically, I would say no, but I feel like that is because I came from, in Australia, it was a very small industry, and there wasn't a lot of work to go around. So women were seen as competition, women coming up through the ranks.
Scarcity.
Absolutely. So my experience was of a lot of the women coming before me not really having a great role model or a mentor in that regard, which is a shame. And so I have tried to be that person to people coming up through the ranks and going, you have potential, let's cultivate that, let's nurture that. My best friends are all stunt women, my absolute besties. And I think here, because there is enough work to go around, there's a lot of work, there's a lot of people doing the work, but you can have that, cultivate that that sense of camaraderie. You've got each other's back. If I can't do a job, she's great. Give her a call, that vice versa. That is definitely something that is more prevalent here than it is in Australia, New Zealand, the UK, South Africa. I've worked in all those places, and because of the scarcity of work, it's not really such a happy place for women to band together.
What advice do you have for women coming up now?
Women coming up now. I have advice for, generally speaking, people coming up now.
You can give us the general advice.
I'm trying to think if there's something I would advise. I mean, one piece of advice for women coming up in the industry now is that, from my own experience, the guys can be your greatest asset. And with, the Me Too movement and everything that's going on right now, there's a bit of a tendency to be down on the guys and be very negative and be, and I know that the pendulum has to swing in that direction before it, comes back and finds a happy medium. And it's never even going to swing far enough in that direction, most likely, to find a happy medium. But the guys in this industry, there are good ones out there with a great wealth of knowledge who actually just want to see you succeed. And if you ask for advice or ask for the help or ask for the training or ask the questions, they will absolutely give you the time of day and then some. And I know that a lot of the time women in the industry, don't get the stunt utility roles, which is just the generic team who are often, rigging and lifting and that kind of a thing. And I spoke to a stunt coordinator about it once, and he said, but I've never seen a woman show an interest in the carabiner until I met you. And so there's both sides of it. The women aren't being given those opportunities, but at the same time, they're not necessarily going in there and getting in amongst it, elbowing out a few guys and saying, hang on, what is that? What are you doing? How do I do that? Teach me. So you need to approach it from both directions.
I absolutely agree. We have to ask and speak up and want it, and they have to let us in.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good fun.
You've been listening to The Other 50%, a herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris-Walker. I'd like to thank Ingrid Kleinig for sharing her story. And special thanks to Jay Rowe, Danny Rosner, and Allison McQuaid for the music. Please find us on your favorite podcast provider and leave a review. And of course, on our website, theother50%.com, all spelled out in letters, for added features, bios of our guests, and the merch. You can also follow us on all the social media platforms. And go subscribe to catchabreakpodcast.com. Thanks for listening. See you next time.